Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Filmmaking Sucks podcast. This week, we have a very special panel for you. This is another coming from the Macabre Faire Film Festival. This time, we have the Latino Filmmakers panel, which I hosted, featuring Edwin Pagan of LatinHorror.com, writer, director Christian Moran of Let's Play Dead Girl, and super horror fan and actress Ines Peek, who joined us for the conversation. This conversation was a lot of fun to have and very enlightening. Check this out. I hope you guys enjoy this. We have one more panel from Macabre Faire coming up soon as a bonus episode. Unfortunately, I did not host that one, but I think you guys will really enjoy that. As always, make sure to subscribe to us. Follow us on Facebook at Filmmaking Sucks Podcast. And subscribe to us, write us some reviews, tell us what you think, and please enjoy this panel.
All right, good. We're rolling. Gentlemen, introduce yourselves. Let me know what do you do, who you are.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us out. Looks like a really fantastic festival. It's been on my radar for quite a while, but I hadn't been able to sort of come out and participate. I'm glad Christian got me out. My name is Edwin Pagan. You can call me Eddie. It's friendlier. And I'm the founder-in-chief of LatinHorror.com, which started actually as of this past October, 10 years.
Wow. Very cool. 10 years.
10 years. Wow. My name is Christian Alexander Moran, and I'm a director, producer, editor. I've been working in the industry since 2003, and I do a lot of behind the scenes work of, anything that's on your Blu-rays and your horror films and stuff like that. All the extras and everything. Got to work with Joe Dante, Roger Corman and stuff like that, all my idols growing up. So, I got my own, experience of my own historical experiences from the actual people.
We have a beautiful young lady here with us.
Hello.
Joining us for the day.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Ines Peek, and I'm a Latina, and I'm a lifelong horror fan.
Very cool.
Those kind of people.
Yeah. So let's just start basic. What got you guys into filmmaking? Where'd you start?
It was funny because growing up, my mother in the South Bronx, single mother. I was born in the Lower East Side, but my mother moved up to the South Bronx probably when I was about a year old. And as I got older, we moved from one neighborhood to another, and it was far enough that I couldn't really hang out with my friends that I sort of had initially started hanging out with in the Bronx. And she realized, I guess, in maybe checking out the neighborhood or even maybe going shopping, that there was a boys' club just about 2 blocks around the corner. And she enrolled me. And they had a dark room in the basement and started taking classes there, right, for a long time. And then what ended up happening and that was at 10 years old when I sort of started learning photography. And this was, real photography with film, developing the film, making prints on an enlarger. And when I was about 17, 18, the director of the Boys Club, Ralph Porter, at that time, had sort of wanted to see me in his office. I thought I was in trouble for some reason. Maybe I did something wrong. And it really was to tell me that they had these vouchers for classes at School of Visual Arts. One was in producing and one was in cinematography. And so I went to the first night, and it was producing, and it was crunching numbers and doing schedules. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, I'm not down with that. It just, I'm not a math guy, and, and I went back the next day. I said, I'm not sure. But he said, well, go to, no problem. If you're not into that, we can give that voucher to someone else that could appreciate it. And he said, but go tomorrow. They have the one in cinematography. That one fit like a glove because I was already, doing photography. It was everything I was already doing, except that we were going to be loading, film instead of still 35 millimeter thing. So after that, I started working with folks in the community and other places, kind of doing little projects with film and stuff, just mostly not even shorts. It was mostly like documenting stuff and just shooting stuff in the neighborhood and then getting the film back. But when I got older, I hooked up with a bunch of people that were part of an organization called NALIP, a National Association of Latino Independent Producers, who were just basically starting. We're just starting. And so through those cats, I was able to then start getting on people's films and shooting their films and things like that. And then, it was only a matter of time before I wanted to do my own shorts and things. But it was like, in New York, one of the things that I always find interesting in New York versus, let's say, LA. In New York, you will get people that want to throw down with you and do films. And when they say that, come the day of, they're all going to be there and you're going to do it. In LA, if you do it, it's really a business town.
Yeah.
Everybody will tell you, they'll do your
Money
film,
making there.
but when it comes close to the thing, they're asking you what's the rate, and if there's no rate, sorry. And that's understood. They're there to make a living. But in New York, there is that thing where everybody's sharing and everybody wants to help out on films.
The one time I was in LA, I got off the filmmakers who were there. They all said the same thing. A lot of them wanted to, especially because they do horror films, they wanted to come to New York because they heard about the horror film community. They've heard of us and how inclusive we all in to help each other.
Exactly.
Because they're like, there's no community out there.
Yeah.
Even at the end of the film festivals, everybody gets their award and they all go home. They don't sit. They didn't sit there and mingle and mix with nothing. That's it. Oh, go have a nice night.
Yeah.
And walk out.
Exactly.
It's like, I've never seen this before.
Exactly. And, so that was sort of my introduction, but I got into horror films when I was a kid. Right after joining the Boys Club, my sister, who's much older than me, took me on to see a film with the man that ultimately would become the father of her children, and it was to see Tales of the Crypt. And, I fell kind of in love with what was going on and how I felt and the stuff that was intriguing me on screen. Later on, it was The Exorcist, which is actually my old-time favorite. And I think ever since then, those things came together. The fact that I was in film and loved horror was going to actually make a perfect fit for me. And that's sort of the introduction for me.
Cool.
I grew up in a big, large family, so I was always the kid that they would throw in the middle to dance. And I don't want to dance, and I hated music and stuff like that. But I had a knack for writing. And my very first grade teacher, she put a pressure on me by telling me, hey, why don't you write a story and I'll read it Friday. So I spent a week writing a story like this. She got it and she read it to the class, and it became my signature for a long time. The guy that writes sequels, I wrote Cujo 2. and then basically everything that I was writing was sequels to everything. And then later on, when I was like 12 or 13 and stuff like that, my family got a camera, to go travel. Right. And I grabbed that camera and, I was like, oh, what could I do with this? And I just started experimenting. It was a lot of feet. A lot of feet. I guess because I would forget to turn off the recorder. So it was like you get like 30 minutes of feet and then somebody wishing a birthday party or something like that. So it started like that, just recording people. And then I liked it so much that I was like, I was a paper boy. So I saved up all my money and I went and bought me I wanted a professional camera, but all I could get was a big body VHS RCA. So it was me,
shoulder
like this,
pack.
Weighs more than you.
Yeah, so I would walk around, and the legend that I have become, the Latino kid that was writing sequels. I made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Mean Green back on the screen. Arachnophobia 2, which I shot with my grandfather. It was like, I need you to be my star. That is awesome. So it just became one of those things that I was just playing around. I never saw it as like a career thing until high school when I actually joined a video department. And in that video department, her name is Marky Hancock, and she was from Chicago. She was a Chicago filmmaker, and she gave each person to do 2 options: a documentary or a dream sequence. Like that. So I decided to do a dream sequence. I didn't know what to do. At the time, I was like really experimenting with the VHS camcorder. Like I would grab my cousins, and now I'm breaking apart away from the sequels like this, and I'm really going crazy. It was like, okay, let's make a horror movie like this. Okay, and then I would grab my aunt's wigs and stuff like this, and just put it on them, and I'm telling my cousin, who was like really like a very stiff Puerto Rican, like this, like he would like I would wrestle with him, and he hit you stiff because he had no flexibility or anything like this. So I told him, I was like, this is perfect. Here, wear this wig. Wear this cape. You're a drag queen vampire, like this. And then since we, at the time I didn't know how they recorded music onto the, you do it in post. No, he had to do it. I would block him out and put Enigma. Remember Enigma? Put Enigma because for some reason I thought that was like some sort of movie music.
There's no singing.
So like this. So and then it came to the fact. It was like, okay. The teacher goes, well, do something personal. What do you think about yourself? And then it was like, the next thing I did, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something. And this is me not knowing what film was, like, the shots and stuff like that. I shot something very complex like this. And it was basic something that, it was a running scene like this of me running through the forest, falling through the tracks, and dying. And then, before that last sight, I look up onto that track and it's me. Like this, and it just became, I'm my worst enemy type of thing.
Yeah.
But I shot it like if it was an action movie, like multiple shots, angles, everything. And, it was one of those things that she says, you're a natural talent because you don't know, nobody taught you how to do it. You just did it. And then from that day, it was like, I want to become a filmmaker. And then that's where the filmmaker in me left because I had a teacher who wrote who did a homework of a what if, and I wrote these 13 letters about African Americans in slavery, and it got picked up by the Gotham Playwrights, and which is a very, very hard school for a public school student to get into. So I got in, I stood there, and it just became a very powerful challenge because, I'm not a very two-dimensional person. I'm I think very cinematic. And my mentor was the writer from M. Butterfly. So it just became a struggle. It was like a struggle fighting with him every day because it was like, just imagine, he would tell you, you have these two actors right here, and I'm with the square. Yeah, and maybe if we position this chair in this way, we get that triangle framing. But that's how, and that is right there. That struggle with him actually pushed me towards filmmaking, and I was like, I'm gonna start doing shooting shorts, and that was like right there at that time was the explosion of the 3-chip camera, Final Cut Pro, iMac, and it was affordable. It was one of those things, and I became what they were calling at the time the basement kids, like that the union people were calling because we were cheap cost, and and we were very good. Because at the time I think it was Final Cut Pro, Final Cut Pro 3 came out with sound, color correction, and stuff like that, and I knew them all. And not just that, I also bootleg Avid. And one of the hardest things is like they would tell you is like, hey, you're not a real editor because you edit on Final Cut Pro like this, and I was like, fuck, you're like this. So I went and learned that tool, and it just became another tool like that. And I learned all the softwares that were out there at the time. But that's how I basically got into the whole filmmaking thing.
People say that to me about Vegas.
Yeah.
You're not an editor. No, it's not editing. Vegas isn't editing. You need Final Cut, or you need Premiere, or you need. I'm like, who cares, man? Just do it. Whatever works for you to get the job done.
It's just a tool.
So, cool. So we got some background on you guys. We know where you came from. Let's get to the meat of this. So, please excuse my cards because I need to have everything, or I don't remember what it was I wanted to say. So, let's start talking about film festivals. Let's start there. So, Macabre Faire, obviously run by Elsie, strong, proud Latina woman. Okay, definitely pushes the hell out of Latino filmmaking. This festival we have out of 80 films or so. I think it's 16 or 17, at least, directed by Latino filmmaker. as well as their international selection. So she really tries to make sure that's a big part of her.
And I've seen
program.
that, and I've seen that for years.
Yes. So, talk to me about your experience at other film festivals compared to that, the diversity in their selections, and the other filmmakers who do attend.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm ironic in the sense that I've always had a bug about jumping through hoops for festivals, and I know that may not make sense, but it's always been a thing. Actually, I put out a film this year, a couple of years ago, that was written by Drew Daywall, who does all these little short films. He was a writer, went on strike during the writer's strike of about 8 years ago. Him and friends started making horror films, and he does all these little shorts, and I just like to get the work out to be seen. But even that film, I put it out directly through YouTube, and I didn't want to go through the thing of film festivals. So the festivals that I've gone has been mostly when I work for someone else.
Okay.
Right. My films, I rarely submit them to festivals by purpose, and that may not make sense to the average person. But so I sometimes on my bio I put a non-award filming, filmmaker, and that's by choice. But it's the activist in me. We won't get into that, but it's a choice thing. But when I've worked as a cinematographer or producer for a lot of filmmakers, of course they're going the traditional route, and a route it's a viable route, right? You get recognition. You can also make very good contacts. So I'm not knocking the process. It's just that it's been my own choice to do the work and not necessarily put it through the meat grinder. But there was festivals even in New York, in my own hometown. The New York International Latino Film Festival was around for 11 years, and that was a festival that I thought had a lot of promise. It just recently came out. It had shut down for about 3 years. HBO brought it back. And I think the first probably 6 to 7, 8 years, it had a lot of promise because it was really about the filmmaker.
Yeah.
As it grew, it became more like industry and the sort of, the flash of it. The VIP parties, the this, the that, and it wasn't about the filmmakers. But I tend to like film festivals, smaller film festivals that still do. They put the emphasis on the filmmaker, like a festival like this one, which clearly you go into a panel and there isn't that big distance between you and the talent.
Yeah.
You show a film and you got a mix of filmmakers and people that come in to see it. I've been to Sundance with a film that I worked with another filmmaker. And even though that's a giant film festival, it has a lot of prestige. Like the people that run it try to keep the emphasis again on filmmakers. So much so that they also have these labs attached to it.
Yeah.
Where they really,
Labs.
you get picked up, and they really try not to make it a one-off.
Yeah.
They really want to nurture your career. If you get on
Make
their
you a filmmaker,
right,
yeah.
they make you a filmmaker, so they'll bring you back.
Like a trade school. Like,
Exactly.
okay, we teach you this, and you're going to do this the rest of your life.
Exactly. They'll bring you back, and at one point you're there for your screenwriting prowess. Another time you're just there for your narrative you're directing. That's a festival I like a lot. Toronto is another festival that, despite its size, they sort of pay attention to the thing. But it's a market.
Yeah.
It's a real market.
Yes.
So it's insane. But it's another festival that when you have small films that make it in, they sort of try to keep an eye on you and what are you doing now? What's going on? Can we make any connections to smaller film festivals? But that's not always the case. There's since I've done docs, I've done New York docs with some of my nonfiction work because I've done quite a few personal documentaries. So that's a festival that's good. But can't really speak in a large sense to a lot of the festivals because I haven't really done the film festival circuit. But I appreciate them when they still keep the focus on the filmmaker versus all the industry parties and the network. Networking is fine, but not when it's all about the sponsors coming in and you slapping yourself against somebody's brand in a stepping.
Yeah.
That's not about the film.
Yeah.
That's about the brand.
Yeah, on my side of film is like recently doing it actually myself, because I've gone to festivals and stuff with documentaries and stuff like that. This time around doing it with my narrative features, shorts. And one of the things I noticed that a lot of like the craftsmen, like the real craftsmen of filmmakers, like a DP or something like that, they don't like. They didn't like the fact that I was doing festivals. They think it's a pyramid scheme, like that. A lot of them.
In some aspect, you can totally see it.
Yeah, you can say. I'm not gonna say they're
sometimes
like this.
that's what
So
you have.
you see it, and it becomes more like I feel like a lot of these festivals is really about circles. It's not really about the quality of the movie
Yes.
or anything like that. It's about breaking into those circles. And going to, like, to say, in my neck of the woods, I don't want to mention festivals because I might be banned in my own neighborhood. No, but it's one of those things that you go over there and they're let's say in case of diversity, they publicize themselves as diverse and stuff like that. And when you go to their galas and stuff like that and their award ceremony, there's not one, Black, African American filmmaker, Latino filmmaker in any of the nominations or anything like that. Because, a lot of these films is not really like, you can't really go, okay, a point system, this is how they're the best. It's really opinionated.
Yeah, so it's more like
they put it like in a Rubik scale.
Yeah.
Like that. Some, I don't know, all festivals does the Rubik scale. I know some of them do. And then, like that. So it's, it's one of those things that, it's kind of like, okay, this is my buddy from the neighborhood.
Yeah, it doesn't really
He's going in there.
come down to the diversity.
Yeah,
it's like, well, there's no Spanish filmmakers nominated because they don't have any Spanish filmmaker friends.
Yes.
These are their friends who are filmmakers. They just they're a bunch of white guys from the neighborhood. All their friends are white guys from the neighborhood, so they nominate all the white guys from the neighborhood.
And then,
regardless of how many other.
And then, like situations like that. So I was like on another festival in Jersey, and I was there with my composer. And we go there, and it's a late showing, and we get there, and he sees the other, the host and the other films and stuff that was like this, and he just comes and whispers in my ear, "This is food for us by us," like that, and I was like, it was like that. There's none of the things like you would think, hey, I might.
Been there with you.
I've
been with you. Spots like that.
Like that. So
been with you for those.
I'm a veteran of a few other horror film festivals in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And I've found that yes, they do typify themselves sometimes as a diverse or all-inclusive.
Yes.
And there will be international entries, things from Russia and things from Mexico, and that's a peeve of mine as well. They feel like Mexico or Mexican films are going to represent all of Latino-dom because that's what they think Latino is, and none of those films is ever going to win. And when I would bring it up to someone that would be intimate with running the festival, the answer always came back, well, they got nominated. Like, that's enough. That's it. We acknowledge your existence on the planet. Go home now.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's one of those things that I also feel. You mentioned prestigious Sundance. I'm mocking them right now. If you don't say
no,
it.
please.
But there's a gap like this, like. Growing up here in the United States, I am, I was born in another country, but I am a U.S. citizen. I went through the work, legal standards and stuff like that. But growing up, I'm an American child like this. But I always felt growing up here that I didn't have, as a filmmaker, the opportunity the same as the filmmakers below the border. like this, and that there is a different perspective amongst the Caucasians of what a Latino is, like this, and it's, you know, like you said, a Mexican movie or a movie from Chile, Argentina, like this, they'll honor it like that, but they won't honor the Latino American.
Right.
Like that. And, you know, right now I know Sundance has, you know, I think they have 8 Latinos there. But hey, out of those 8 Latinos, majority are from water. You know,
Right.
and there's not a sufficient amount of programs to help us, and I bring it because I just recently his last name is Santino, and he made a movie about transsexuals. It's called Mala Mala, Boricua, and you could probably pick it up. He put it on record. It's recorded. You can hear his voice and stuff like that. And he says it's like this, you know. It's like, I made this movie like that. It has a voice like this. I feel it's very good. It's one of my good materials. It goes to Tribeca. Can't freaking sell it at all. Yeah. So it goes for my next movie, and he's a, you know, he directs with a partner, and he tells his partner, you know, I bet you something. What? Our next movie is gonna be about a white person, and we're gonna be selling it. I bet you. Like this, we're gonna go into bigger festivals. So he makes Dina, which is a movie, white woman, and I think it's on the spectrum. You know, she's on some sort of spectrum, and what happened? He wins Sundance in the documentary field, the grand jury. And he goes, he goes to his partner, I told you so. I told you so. And then that's the things that this generation feels like. I feel, you know, that I have to tell an American movie, a white movie, so I can actually be recognized as a director. And that's like kind of like the same sentiment that I've heard with younger Latinos that I go, you know, like to school with or teach or whatever. It's like, no, I have to, you know.
Well, just the other side, my comment about how film festivals think Mexicans are going to represent all of Latino-dom, and it ties into what you just said. When I go to these film festivals, the Mexican entries all have lucha libre, which is wrestling, Mexican wrestling, or they're about La Llorona.
Yes.
That legend, all right? And I wonder, are Mexicans also feeling marginalized, that they can't get an entry into a film festival if it doesn't deal with one of those two subjects?
It's like that's what
Because
Americans know.
that is so weird.
That's it.
There
You know,
to be other, we all have, in the few minutes we've been together, we all have our own stories, and you know, my background, I'm not a filmmaker or a producer or anything, and I came here, as I said, I'm a lifelong horror fan, and I'm finding out at this stage of my life I'm a frustrated actress as well. But we don't have the same opportunities. Our parents and our families can't say to us, like they've said to a lot of non-minority actors and actress kids, and you know, our parents couldn't tell us to, go ahead, we'll support you while you try to be an actress, or you try to be a director, or here's the money to go to New York film school or anything like that. We're busy trying to help our, you know, go to work and contribute to the house and try to make a life. And
it kind of resembles what, like they say, when Iratu won his Oscar, like this, being on Twitter and stuff like that, and how a lot of Latino that are not Mexican responded negatively towards it. You know, it's like going, Oscar, hashtag Oscar things, we're all Mexican, hashtag things. And then, you know, there were people actually made articles about it the next day about it, you know, like, you know, Me doing all that stuff, writing, and a lot of people on those comments sections and also on the actual articles, they felt that they felt that he was privileged.
Well, what's
They want you to be grateful.
Yeah,
they want
exactly.
you to be. Whenever a minority wins something, if they have any sort of real response, whatever their gut response is, you always get comments the next day on their statement how ungrateful they were.
Right.
When they've worked maybe 2 to 10 times harder than a non-minority to get that prize.
But you know what's interesting? After I got into filmmaking in New York a lot, and I really wanted to get back, and I started a theater group for about 13 years because I couldn't get much work in the union as a cinematographer, which was I was working. So I started a theater group with a friend. We did that for 13 years. We got burnt out because I was doing sort of work with youth. I went back to filmmaking, joined a group that was just starting called the National Association of Latino Independent Producers. Had a chapter in California, one in New York. And I went into that because a friend said, "Oh, you want to get back into film? This group is forming in New York." And it was all these young filmmakers. And I thought, okay, that'll be a good way, one, to find out what the technology is now. Because the last time I had edited was on 3/4-inch pneumatic, big clunky tapes. Assemble edit. If you messed up, you had to start all over
Machine
again.
the size of the table.
Exactly. So I said, I want to get back into the thing. But when I got really indoctrinated into that, I ultimately got on the board, was president after about 7 years of the New York chapter. But, we would have these discussions all the time because one of the things happens is, and you're quite right about that, if you go to South and Central America and Mexico, all you got to see any film coming from those countries, including Spain, is that all you have to do is look at the credits, right? And here you may get, all right, maybe the New York State Council on the Arts may give filmmaking, and it's a fellowship. It's like you get 6 Gs because what you submitted is good enough that we think you merit a little something.
Yeah.
This is for you. It's not really to make film. This is something for you as sort of like, okay, this is good work. But you look at those Spain, Mexico, South and Central America, you look at the end credits, there's like probably 300 logos of the something economic this, the agriculture that, they all support film. So you even go and look at a film of Guillermo del Toro, he doesn't want to show these days.
Stuart Gordon, too.
Right.
Does the same
and
thing.
you see that even as a young man when he started out, one, he came from a pretty well-off family, and two, you see his credits, the logos on the back of the film, so they had support. And this is not to knock anyone, because if that's the support that's in those countries, it's not about to them, ignore it or toss it away. But we don't have that support here. When I was on Nalip, we discovered the same thing in the documentary world, right? And it was never as obvious as when Ken Burns started coming out with his documentary, like Baseball, with no Latinos in them. Jazz, with almost no African Americans and no Latinos in them. And when they did the one on World War II, and it had no Latinos in it and no Native Americans, Nalip did a campaign against that, right? And we were like, but how does that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't have the information. Now, this is one of the most prestigious filmmakers coming out of the corporate public, CPB, PBS spectrum, and we finally had their feet to the fire, and they said, okay, what we're going to do before broadcast is we're going to hire someone to do some more interviews so they can be included, right? So they hired Hector Galan out of Austin, who's probably one of the few Latinos that has a lot of stuff coming through PBS. So he had some interviews. He interviewed some Chicano, Mexican American soldiers. They included it in the broadcast, right? But then when we're saying, when the DVD comes out, the DVD didn't have those interviews. They said, oh no, because that was too late. That was done too late for it to be included and things. So it made the couple of days of broadcast, but in the DVD that goes to university
Which is
libraries.
even harder to get ready for broadcast than it is for DVD.
Right.
There's more specs and the quality
So
QC
it never made
is
it
ridiculous
onto
for
the
broadcast.
final historical hard material that went out. And I think he's about to come out with another thing. I forget if it's Vietnam or Korea. And what we did at that time when we found out that he was going to do that, all the universities, and on the West Coast and in New York, got as much material about that particular subject and send it to him in a tractor trailer, like to his office. Like, there ain't no fucking way you're not going to say that you didn't have the material to include Latinos in the next one. But, you see it across the spectrum. You look at American Masters. Rarely any Latino. I think they've done one on Tito Puente, and that's because he's digestible by mainstream audiences, right? He's gone around the world.
Yeah, you know his name.
No Celia Cruz, no this. And then you look at how many, they've probably done 150 American Masters. All legitimate people.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're so focused on this narrow spectrum that it doesn't really show the American experience, right? Because the American experience is not just Anglo, it's not just European, right? Because it's not just, they'll do, even people that never functioned in America, but who are revered here as an American master, but not do what other people do. So it's an issue across the board, So it's not even just in narrative and festivals. And even in what you think is an even playing field, right? Because PBS is federally funded so that it's in the public interest.
Yeah.
That's what PBS originally, Channel 13 and all that was mandated so that it would show the American experience, and it's still awarded with public funds.
So what's your opinion on why? Is it simply because these are the names that sell? Or is it back to what you were talking about, filming, where there's a little circle and they do favors for their friends? Or do they just feel like, no, this is the public perception we're going to shape, and that's all there is to it?
There's that, that old myth, Latino and Black films don't sell. They're in that system, in that systematic mindset that, they don't want, there's millions and millions of dollars. They don't want to take a chance.
What do you think is fueling that specific mindset that they don't sell? Because they obviously do. You say that they don't sell. It's bullshit.
Right?
That's total bullshit. What is it that fuels that mindset then?
It's. I think my take on it from what we did through NALIT, right, and the Chicano studies in California. Chon Noriega did a whole study, and actually a documentary that after the fact has some of that information called Latinos the Unreal, which shows about how Latinos have been represented in media, in film, television, and even news in a contemporary basis. Is that you also these places are insular. I mean, it's a business, right? Because one of the things I used to say when I was on NALIT, they would say, "Oh, well, they got to give us a piece of the pie." I said, "Nobody's going to give you a piece of the pie for free, right?" If we can show them that we can make money, it's not necessarily only going to be a black or white thing. You show them you can make green, you're in.
Yeah.
Right? So, but then you go to these things and you try to pitch ideas and they don't understand it.
Yeah.
Right? And there are no substantial base of Latino executives at these places. So it's like anything else. I mean, have you ever gone to a place where you're part of the squad? Let's take this film festival for us. And I'm not saying that it's part of that dilemma, but you'll find that it's a small group of people that make the decisions, right? That keep it going and keep things running. Now you take that up to a level where you're talking about interest in the billions of dollars. They're not just going to give it away.
Of course not.
And so they're looking at the bottom line. And in their mind, the same reason that stereotypes and those kind of tropes still exist is because they're removed from these communities. And so they keep repeating the same thing of what works for them. So they see America as primarily Anglo, right? They don't really know about our community. So when they even attempt to do those kind of movies, they fail epically because they're only putting in what they think sells. So, of course, if there's a Latino, you got to be a maid, you got to be a thug, or you got to be, even when they put you even
marginalized.
Right, even when you take Latinas who have gotten some sort of recognition in the industry, they always got to be the Latina who's the single mother with the kid, right?
And you have to talk like this.
Right, or you're the love interest of the Anglo guy. Right.
That is her voice, but she is the most popular.
Right.
Like, she does have that accent. Even her son says this is her voice.
Yeah.
That's what she sounds like. And sometimes she does embellish a bit, but it's exactly that. This is what's made her popular.
It's a narrow sort of myopic view of what's possible out there. I think we're at a good place because I think, like, for instance, again, there's a really good resurgence in the African American community with what's happening in television and film. Almost every other week, there's a film coming out from the African American community.
But the thing is that I feel that's the African Americans. Like us Latinos are invisible right now.
Oh, we are.
African Americans are.
They have like this. They're
really,
gatekeepers.
there's literally
pushing,
riots going.
are
There's
pushing-
literally
are
riots
pushing
happening
them.
right now
Yes.
because of the African American
Yeah.
community and everything.
So-
So it's like everybody is going out of their
Yeah.
way to make it. All right, let's include
Yeah.
them now.
Mhm.
But that's not
But
happening.
to us Latino. You know, like us Latino. I think the numbers are like we're like I think it was like 20 something. What's the number there?
I have it.
It's-
Out of the Hispanic citizens, 17% of the population, 11,000 films studied, 5.8% speaking roles were Hispanic or Latino.
Mm-hmm.
Of the top 100 grossing films in 2016, they made up 3.1% of the roles.
Right.
Now, audience attendance. You got the one for the audience attendance there?
No, I didn't.
All right, audience attendance, right? Compared to anybody, Latinos go to the movies.
We over-index.
Yes,
It's the same way with
we're completely over
with women in film
Like
too.
this, oh,
The
yeah.
Females are almost 60% of the movie-going demographic, but female-fronted films don't sell. Women don't want
I'll
movies.
tell you, I had a conversation with another producer. Like that, this is a Caucasian producer, and he plainly told me, he goes like this. There is no need to sell it to the Latino because the Latino thinks he's white.
Say that again, say
That he's white, Caucasian.
Got you.
There's no need.
Well,
that isn't. But that's
I think that comes from the world that Trump comes
Yeah.
from. Of the last 40, 50, 60 years where, I mean, look at Hollywood from the 70s, 60s, even before that, where Latino, Hispanic actors changed their names in order to get jobs. Look at
it
this.
still happens.
Martin Sheen, Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, who has a career,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's the most obvious, and there's so many who've changed their names over time. People don't even know they have Hispanic heritage. They have no idea.
But I think in this case is like
It was almost shameful, is what I'm saying.
There is no,
You know?
There's no need to market to them.
Mhm.
Like even though we're the biggest market, you know, right now we purchase, towards this country, and then towards the film industry, and then it had me thinking. I was not gonna completely knock out his thing. It's like you got to look the downfall of Univision. Like this. There was a certain point about 5 years ago, a certain point where Univision just started dropping in ratings, like this. So they ordered, they reinforced their studios in Miami, and they did focus groups, and all the Latinos from watching the novelas, they wanted to see themselves as Americans. They wanted to have the cell phone. They saw this as like that. So the next thing you know, there you have these novelas in urban cities, New York, Miami, LA, like this. It's one of those things that let's say the immigrant population, well, really watches the novela, wanted to see themselves that way. Now you have a first and second and a third generation that is not relating to the those Latinos and those like this, and you got to ask yourself, what are they relating? And then you got to see the growth in the suburbs. We're like 40% in suburbs now.
I do
that's
agree
a
with
lot,
what you're saying. I do agree with what you're saying.
Do they see that? The American dream, the picket fences, that like to me, like everybody asks me is like there's this running joke with Latina between me and my fiance is like if you get like you highlight your hair, the gold of those highlights like this, and you move to Long Island, you're white. you sold out. So it's like one of those things that I poke because it became like a trend. I think in the late '90s, like this, and then it just like one of those things that right now, and I think about a lot. It was like, is it because we don't want to be portrayed anymore as like. As Latino, we want to be American, take off the Latin American.
To speak to that just a little
American.
bit, though, I do agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, if you watch American soap operas too, as soon as they got on the technology revolution, they dropped off as well. They still there, but was it Young and the Restless?
Yeah.
The oldest one started out as a radio drama. My wife used to work for them she interned under Young and the Restless, and I think they had 70 years or so, and it went from the number one soap opera, and then they started doing more of the handheld reality style with it, and they started bringing the cell phones in and all this stuff. Now it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. This is the oldest damn soap opera out there. As soon as it hit the millennial generation, fell off. So while I agree with what you're saying, I do think that it's making it modern is also what is a big part of what killed it, because that's happening across, regardless of
it's happening.
of the culture that's doing it. Modernization of a soap opera is kind of killing them because our generations don't watch soap operas. You guys watch the TV novellas because your parents watched them. But once you had your own TV, fuck this. You know what I mean? No, you got over it, you know? And I was the same way. I grew up, my grandmother watched Young and the Restless and General Hospital every day, and I sat there and I watched it with her. As soon as I had my own TV in the bedroom, I got Monsters and Freddy's Nightmares. I had all that stuff, you know? So I think that's also part of a generational thing as well.
No, I think it's a generational. It's like even with my movie, it was like one of those things. Is like give them a role. You know, two Latinas, give them a role and try to like
watch them be kids.
These are the kids, their generation. And it was like this, and then I was like, oh, let me just throw in one word of Spanish. You know, which is
well, it's going back. You mentioned Tito Puente, and Tito Puente. My dad was an entertainer, and Tito Puente used to come to our house, and we used to have all sorts of musicians in our house. And I remember that there were gigs that Tito Puente would play, and the only Latin people in the place were him and the band. And they would do Latinized versions of American songs to make the Latino thing. Everyone thought it was so exotic, you know? And that kind of thing, if you're the subject of, and no one wants to talk about it, we all know that there were clubs and places where black people were never going to be allowed. And no one talks about that happening to Hispanics, but it did, and it still does. I live on Long Island, and my neighbors ignore me. And I've lived there for over 10 years.
You could be the spooky lady too, so
a little bit.
They ignore me too in my neighborhood. I got a spider in my front window. They ignore me as well.
But when this kind of pushing away your culture and wanting to be seen as white happens in black culture as well. So Latinos, you've got generations. You see your father being harassed by police or and being thrown out of places where he's trying to get a job to feed his family. So you're going to grow up and you're going to start going, maybe I went through a blonde hair phase, okay,
I did too.
and that kind of thing. And so I understand that kind of thing, but and this might be the bright side to all the weird racial adversity thing that's going on, is that you may have to look at your culture and say, no, this is who I am, and be more Hispanic. That sounds so weird, but film companies, they make black movies for the black audience. They don't make black movies that white people are going to go see, and they don't see where they can make a Hispanic movie.
Yeah, but that's
it's good for Latinos. White movies are good enough, and so why should they give from a business point of view? Because that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the money. Why should they invest in an unknown quantity? To them, you're an unknown quantity.
Can I get one? The thing is, what you're saying, like this, like, they're just saying like this. That's the point that this producer was making, is like, since they're the largest and they just keep going and watching, like that, there's no need to market to
Yeah.
them.
Right.
So why give
They're
them
watching
a Latino movie?
Yeah, we already have their money,
We
so
already
why
have
do
it,
more?
you know, why do more?
Which is, that was what I would say. We're a captured audience already. You know, I think a friend of mine who was Moctezuma Espalza, who was the producer of Gods in General, said, you know, he used to say we're a self-seducing audience. Because we go see every African American movie that comes out, we want to go see it, right? Particularly on the coast, because I think blacks and Hispanics, particularly in New York, grew up together, so we can relate to that. But when I was growing up, right, I would listen to the rap, I would listen to R&B, I would listen to like a little bit of the jazz, right? But I hated it when I heard the pots and pan music come out, which was like salsa, right? But I mean, I love it now. Right, I love it now. It's all on my phone, and that's all I listen to. But when I was a kid, it was like, oh man, it might as well have been that Vita Ro commercial where everybody went around with the pot and pan.
I'm also the same way because of the way my father raised me. My father had a big rift between his. He was raised. Him and his one brother. They had an Italian father and a Puerto Rican mother, and then their father died, and mother remarried, married a Puerto Rican man. So the rest of their 10 siblings, 100% Puerto Rican.
Right.
You know, so there was a little bit of a separation between them, and he had that rift. And when I was young, that rift was obvious in my life, where Puerto Ricans are dirty, they're nasty, they're horrible, because that was him talking about his family.
Right.
So I never, and my mother's Italian, and so I was never taught Spanish when I was young. He didn't want us speaking Spanish.
Right.
He was ashamed.
Right.
He was because, you know, that's why I say this is the culture I knew growing up. I have a father who is ashamed of being Spanish. So when my mother wanted us, she's like, they're Spanish. Let them learn Spanish. No, it's a dirty language. Cockroaches speak that. Wow. And that's what we did. And now in his life, very close with his family, and he wants me to be part of it. And I'm like, I just spent the last 25 years of my life with this impression you put on me.
Right.
And that's, I think, very reflective of how Latinos and Hispanics felt this way in the country before the 21st century.
Right.
That it was just something to be ashamed of, and you hid it and you put it back. So I want to get into what you guys do before.
It's like I noticed that a lot because I grew up with the Boricuas. I noticed that a lot with the Boricuas. I didn't notice as much with the Central Americans or the South Americans. It was one of those things. Like I grew up in Richmond Hill, Queens, and at that time there was tons of Boricuas there, and going to the public schools. Like I would get babysit by one into a Puerto Rican family, and they didn't want their kids to speak to me in Spanish, like that. And but when I would go to, let's say, somebody from Central America or other, it was loud. They took it with a different type of pride, unless you met with a Boricua that's from the island.
Different.
Yeah.
Which is completely different. Like that. It
sounds like he like Tarzan. Tarzan was raised by a wild pack of apes, and you were raised by a wild pack of Boricuas.
Oh no! I'll tell you. I always tell this story. Is I went back to Ecuador. It was my very first time going back, and it was at age of 13. And I've never met Tia Lili. Her name was. She was like a legend. Like this, all the stories from South America was about this Tia Lili. And so I got off the airplane, got to her house and stuff like this, and I went to her. We hugged, we kissed. It was a great moment. But I told her, "Voy para atrás." She slapped me. She slapped the crap out of me. And why? Is because I was speaking the Puerto Rican dialect.
Ooh. Yeah. You had the accent. Yeah.
She like that. The accent, it was a double. The accent and the word. Voy a regresar? No. I said, voy a.
So let's move into what you guys, let's move into something that you guys do before we end this. You've LatinHorror.com. You started the Proxies of Fear.
Oh yes. Yes.
How is it that you use these to create that diversity, to give that space to these Latino and Hispanic filmmakers, so that they have a place for their voice and their films
Yeah, well, it's been a little bit inactive the last couple of years because of hip surgery. One of the reasons I'm able to get now is that
personal life gets in the way sometimes.
But the genesis of Latin horror was that it's only 10 years ago. I'm 54, so that's in my 40s when I started it. What ended up happening was that I had just come off shooting on a feature film as a DP, as a cinematographer. And you know the deal, you work on a long project, 20 days, whatever, and all of a sudden you're not doing anything. And that creative energy and that need to be part of something, it's a sugar, it's like you crash. And I was like bummed out, and I said, I got to find something to do between these projects. And I kept trying to think of what to do. And one day I'm thinking, all right, I'm Hispanic, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm Latino. And it was like, oh shit, Latin horror.
Yeah.
But to me, I was like, that's not going to be available. Like, have I heard of it? But I went, is it a website yet? No. Is it a group? No. Are any films being dubbed that? No. There was only one little thing that I found, actually by accident, in one of the DVD places on 14th Street by like 6th Avenue. And it was an anthology of Mexican films that the guy at the store put a label on top that they printed out with the price that said...
Kim's Video, was this?
Yes. They put Latin horror. It was because instead of saying Mexican horror, they figured Latino, because we're Latino here. So I said, oh shit, that's it. So I hooked up the website in terms of getting the name right away. And then a friend helped me. After I put up the page, a friend of mine said, well, are you going to register people? I said, register people? He said, well, he's a programmer. So he said, let me just do the registration page. I think I left it after I put up the information page up, probably 3.5 months before I went back, because I was busy with other things. I got on another project. When I came back, I said, how do I check this, how do I get the information? He says, I emailed you the password and link when we first went back. 3,000 people had registered in 3.5 months.
Wow.
Right? And it wasn't just Latino, it was Latino, all, from all backgrounds. Because, we know.
Found something.
Right. Because I was saying it was like, I think my little promo at the time was, join la revolución, the revolution. And it was like, you've heard about rock en español. Now it's Latin horror. And it was a time where even then, when rock en español was like becoming popular in the U.S., people were like, what the hell is that? Even though the name said what it is, rock en español. But people couldn't imagine Latinos rocking it out, And it was mostly the Mexicans that were doing it and stuff, but it caught. Now rock en español is not a foreign thing. And I went through a little brief period there where people were like, Latin horror? But the people that were in horror got it because they're like, oh, horror. J-horror had been coming out, all this stuff. So Italian horror. And I'm like, wow, I may have something here, right? So then at that point, I started like doing articles and things of that nature and pushing the idea that Latinos had their own distinct idiosyncratic nature of our own work, because we have a long trajectory of literature in Latin America that goes back hundreds of years that has distinct fingerprints on it, right? The way we tell, because our religion, our upbringing, there are things, and then those things will come up, but it's not just that. It goes in, South Central America, Puerto Rico, and all this stuff. And so I started trying to formulate what that was, because you can't just create a genre and leave it at that. It has to have boundaries and why you call it that and what it is. And one of the things that came about at one point was an article. Guillermo del Toro was quoted about that time, and he said, he was trying to break down the distinction, and he said, the difference between American horror and Latin horror is that American horror tries to destroy the physical, like slasher films and all that stuff. And Latin horror destroys the mind and the soul. So it's more still about what the suspense is, what really hits you on a primal level. And now American horror wasn't always that way, right? You go 40s and 50s, it was very much that too, very more suspense and all that stuff. But
William Castle.
Right, and all that stuff changed. It's going back a little bit now, but... And I was like, oh, that's it, So what started happening was I started getting films in from people to screen or to review. And over a period of time, in a couple of years, I was actually getting DVDs back of people that made films and who had now categorized it as Latin horror, right? And that, I was like, wow.
That's pretty cool.
One of my earliest experiences, I was still on MySpace before Facebook. That's why I actually launched Latin Horror Film in terms of social media. There was this guy from Chile, a filmmaker, reached out to me there. You know, he's like, "Oh, I'm out here in Chile. I love horror films. I'm doing this stuff, but I'm getting no support, and I'm kind of down." I said, "Look, stick with it. Stick with it. You're gonna find people eventually that are like-minded." And he said, "Don't think about it you being alone in Chile doing horror. Think about you're the fucking George Romero of Chile, right? You're the George Romero of Chile, and you got a whole pond to make your own and stuff." And as the years pass, this dude is broken out and made all this stuff. And he says, "I'm glad you encouraged me back then, because I felt like I was like, until I came across your page, I thought I was the only guy floating out here doing this kind of stuff."
3,000-4,000 other people.
Right. And I think that was the thing. And so what I think what the website did for a long period of time is just sort of bring people together that said, "Oh shit, I've been dealing in this space, but I've been calling it horror and hadn't really taken ownership like it has a distinct capacity to it in terms of the thing." So for me, Latin horror was films that were made by Latinos doing horror, but it was also, what are the elements that are in it? So for instance, for me, Latin horror is very much like Japanese horror. In both films, unlike American films, and again, it's not to knock American films, but the convention is there where we've even made jokes about it, where there's bodies dropping, bodies hitting the floor all the time, and we're still like nothing is happening. Like,
that's American culture. So it's a suburban neighborhood where everybody is blind to the truth of the world.
Right?
So there's this killer going out killing people, and nobody even notices that it's happening.
And negating it.
Because Americans are so complacent in their day-to-day life, they'll let anything happen around them as long as it doesn't affect them.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter, and that's a very American.
Exactly. And so you look at Japanese horror and Latin horror. From frame one, we believe that there's something supernatural happening.
Because in their culture, ghosts are real.
We just want to know why it's happening, or what do I need to do to stop it.
Yeah.
And so the film becomes interesting right away, because we're not bound by that sort of like, we got to get past the fact that the head is in your lap now.
Yeah, when you say, "Oh, I saw a ghost," in the Japanese culture, they believe you immediately.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and
you can move on, and you can move on instead of plot. Yes. Right? American film is plot.
It's a fact.
This happened, now this happened, that happened.
Yeah.
It's plot. In Japanese horror films, and in a lot of their narrative from general mainstream and in ours, it's character driven, it's story based. And so you can get deeper into what these characters do and what they've done. That's why I said some people sometimes they seem a little slow. But the intelligent writing that's there is matches what comes out of England. Because I like a lot of English films because they're just so witty and so smartly done that you can really engage, and you feel like, 2 hours have passed, but you get into the characters, not just what's going on. And so I think Latin horror allowed a lot of people to sort of say there's a space for us, right? And it wasn't just for the Latino doing horror films, or Latina, right? Because a lot of women have jumped into the space, a lot of them that I've written about, but it was people that can also understand what it was, and also people that just you're a horror fan, whether you're Latina or not, you were all of a sudden, there was another faucet open for you that you didn't realize existed. And also helping coin the damn thing. Not that I can take credit for inventing Latin horror, no way around it, but just creating a label for it. And that's helped a lot of people, and I think that, that in itself is cool, because I have friends on the West Coast and stuff that are avid fans of, that do films, but like every hashtag of everything they post, hashtag Latin horror, like they've taken ownership. Like it doesn't belong to me. Yeah. The website does,
it
but
belongs to the filmmakers.
Right.
He owns the .com.
I own the .com.
Talk about proxies of fear.
I moved to Jersey City, and at the time I went in there, the gentrification process had started, and they kept labeling the city very diverse. This is and it is, it's I think the number one top city diverse in all the United States. So you go diversity, the paper, the television, and stuff like this. And I come from Jackson Heights, Queens, like that, and around 74th Street. And in 74th Street, there's just a 1 block radius where you got the Indians, you got all of South America, you got all of Asia. We're forced to eat their food, to smell their food, to ride on the subway with them, be neighbors with them, talk to them. Like this. And then I go over to Jersey, and they're saying, it's diverse. And then all you see is like a very segregated environment. So it was just one of those things that it was like bothering me. I'm living over there, and there was this lady. Ever since I got there, found out who I am, in the industry. So she wanted to feature my work, but I didn't want to do it. I was not that type of person, to go, this is my work, blah 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 blah, like this since I was a child to now, type of thing. Showcase it because Jersey City is a very it's an art community, and they're very supportive in that. But when I try to kind of distance myself because they had the same mentality in all arts. Is that film to be is like this. It's the whole horror thing. You probably know it. You've probably been told like this. But in the whole art spectrum and the totem pole, film is not even in the bottom. It's in the third. Compared to like this. And in horror, in our industry,
it's in the dirt of the dirt.
It's in the dirt of the dirt.
Meanwhile, horror is the only one that sells consistently. Yeah. Horror and action are the only ones that sell every single time. They may not sell the greatest, but they sell no matter what. No matter what, you could sell a $2,000 movie, $2,000 horror movie. You ain't selling a $2,000 comedy. Nobody's watching. Nobody.
So, being there, I went, to support the communities, but especially the art and stuff like that. But I met somebody, in the press, and he gave me the opportunity to voice myself, and I trashed the city. I tried. No, I really tried. I was telling the truth. But a lot of the residents that live there, the old school residents, and the ones that wanted to make some change, they ain't back me. So it was like one of those things I saw. I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. It was like now I can say anything I want without being censored. And all the press people over there was like, oh, I know they're kind of using me to sell more papers with the type of thing, but it was just one of those things. It's like, oh, I can, I'll be like, drop the pipe bomb, which is like a wrestling term. Yeah. So this lady kept chasing me because more and more coverage in the press I was getting, the more and more popular it was becoming. And it was one of those things that, I was going to festivals and I had the art community. I had the respect of them, which is one of the, it feels good. It's like, oh, the acknowledgement. I'm like right there with the sculptor and the painter.
Putting out that chest there.
Like this. So it felt good that they were backing me and they were seeing that film was an art. And then one day I saw an article in the paper, and it was I think it was like the second announcement that Jersey City once again is. It's diversity, and the mayor of the town, Mayor Phillips is his name. He kept using it for his campaign to re-election and everything, and it's just like it's like what, I have to do something. I have to do something like that, and I didn't know what yet, and then I was very close to the curator of this art house, and it's the same person that has always tried to chase me down. And I was sitting down with her in that and she was like, I want you to do a show. And I was like, yeah, you've been chasing me for such a long time, but like, no, do a show, like that, do something that you want to do, it's like this, and right there it just hit me. It's like, okay. And he goes, well, if you're going to do a show, do 3 of them. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a chance to see what the show's about, like this. And then basically it was just me saying, I want to do a show. It's going to be, revolving around Latinos, but it's a show really to tell the world how diversity is. Because apparently there's this rule that the Caucasian has to be the lead, and you have your Black, Spanish sub characters, and that's apparently diversity.
Yeah.
So it was, and right there, that was my pitch to her. Just saying that, and then it's like, and then my priority is the audience too. I'm gonna fill 50% of that audience with people from Greenville, which is an African American community, the Latinos from the Heights, which is a Puerto Rican community, and all is because like this, and what drove me to throw it in that spot in the place is that was a very thriving Puerto Rican community, and there's it's gone. You had like a nice, beautiful bike shops that with those like fancy bikes with the Puerto Rican side. You see it, it's like this, gone, and it was like, there's like this culture, this depleting. So it was like, I'm gonna do the show like this, and I told her I'm gonna do it that, and how women go, mansplaining. It's getting white splaining. Like this, they try to relate to me, and I was like, no, you're not getting it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get Latinos because we're full of diversity. Like that, we're not just we're a culture. We're not a race.
So this is still ongoing?
Yeah.
This series?
No, it is. It's gonna be more.
Okay.
Yeah, like this. But the whole point was to bring different colors to see what diversity is. Nobody is really featured. Everybody got their own moment. It's like, boom, the makeup artist got its own moment. She did her talent. She got her interview. Moved to the poet. African American. He did his poems. Boom, he got his own moment. And it was just one of those things. This is what a diverse show is. This is how it looks. And it was like, it was just to prove a point of what diversity is. And it's like, I'll tell you, I was in the film festival. I do this like Moran verses on my Facebook. Like this.
Proxy chat.
Yeah, proxy chat. And I do Moran verses. And I chose not to tell one like this because I know I was going to be in the circuits with that person. My fiance brings me to a lot of comedy shows. And I know, like, if there's something different, it was something they could jump on, they'll jump on it and, make fun of it. Like that. You got freaking a bunch of sensitive actors there. Sensitive filmmakers and artists who watch you like this. And as soon as I saw that format, I was like, oh, no. This is going to be a problem. So, basically what happened was a movie started, comedy coming. He just did one joke about the movie. The next movie was it. That's when he really went up. So I did a movie that was an Asian movie with a centered white character, and everybody was the other like this. So basically, he got very frustrated, mad. As I was sitting with him, he got very frustrated, and mad at the comedian. And here's what he said. He goes, I made sure that the thing was diverse. I made sure everybody like this. I had the 90%, which is the rule. Yeah. The rule for the grants. The rule of this. The rules like that. You have to have this percentage. 90%. That's how he responded. And then
so
that's the problem.
Hit that quota for the sake of hitting it and getting his grants, and there was no...
I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to say, like, as soon as I saw it, I thought about Bruce Lee and Kung Fu. Like this, and Bruce Lee's frustration of it. Like this. But it was always, like, I think that in Bruce Lee's book, there's a comment that he says, I want to mess it up like this, but I'm paraphrasing, and there's a misconception in how they... misconception of how... you perceive something, and it's like diversity is that you have that white guy as the lead, and everybody else is all like that, and that's how they see it. It's not they meet a quota, like this. He just used, I felt that he used it as 90%
Yeah.
because the comedian he
It's a
made
little- yeah,
fun
okay.
of.
Like
He
he gave
goes-
him this is what we consider
Yes.
diversity, and I hit that.
Yes.
You know, like I fit the mold of diversity.
It's a mentality.
Yes, it's just a
That's what it is.
Yeah. It's not like he went into this
Yeah.
low. I
No,
just
no.
want these people in it. No. I want to fit the mold of what that means.
Yes, it's like
You know, I wanna-
a state of mind.
Yeah. So, I think we could sit here all
Now,
day.
erase all
But-
that I just said because the filmmakers is actually
It's actually where we're sitting in a void. What are you talking about? We could sit here all day and talk about this. So, thank you guys, lady,
Okay.
Thank
for
you.
joining. Let me know where can everybody find you for the listeners.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, easily find me at latinhorror.com. My information is up there. My cell phone is up there. My email is up there. If folks want to cut to the chase, they can just email me at epagan@latinhorror. Very simply, I do respond to my email. So, anyone who's interested in chatting it up, they can certainly do that.
Cool.
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Christian A. Moran, or you can, email me at cmoran29@gmail. And you can also follow my recent movie, Let's Play Dead Girl, on Facebook. So, that's where you can find me.
Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to?
Where do we find a fan like you?
If you'd like to follow my Facebook page, Ines Peek on Facebook,
Okay.
and any horror convention in the area, I'll be there.
Cool.
All right, we're going to do that right now.
Making some new friends. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.